New York City, we got to have a talk. We have to talk, a heart to heart. I'll call it a meeting. How can you allow Conrad Zohran Mamdani to punk you out of celebrating this country's 250th birthday in Times Square? Meanwhile, his fucking friends, you know who I'm talking about, can sit there and pray several times out of the day. How the fuck is that possible? That is so biased. We have got to stop letting these anti-American communists come into our country and wage war against the American way of life. You know, I'm not going to lie, I'm at a loss for words. I never thought I'd see the day where New Yorkers would lay down for some foreigner. I mean, who died and left him, boss?
To New York City, how do you feel about the fact that your wonderful communist mayor, Zohran Mamdani, signed an emergency order that prevents people from coming down to Times Square and celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States?
Times Square, a ball drop is planned to celebrate America's 250th birthday. But thanks to Mayor Mamdani's emergency order denying permits during the World Cup, the public isn't invited to attend.
Say what?
So our famous communist won't allow people to come up and see and celebrate 250th years for the U.S. He needs to go.
Is this America? Is this really New York? Where we at?
I think that's really sad.
Yeah, I think that's very silly.
Oh. Gee, you'd imagine there should be a...
New York City, have you gotten it yet? How much more do you need to see? This guy needs to be recalled immediately. Go ahead and just put this into perspective in case it's not clear already. So Muslims are being permitted to pray in Times Square, right? Multiple times a day. But Americans are not allowed to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. What are we even doing here? For the people who love New York City, for the people who love New York, do yourself a favor and get this guy out of office.
What's up, family? I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. And let's be real for a second. Something feels off right now, and especially when you look at a place like New York City, because what used to be one of the most iconic cities in the world is starting to look something completely different right before our eyes. And people are finally starting to wake up to it. But the question is whether it's already too late, because when you really pay attention to what's happening, it's not just about bad decisions here and there. It's about a pattern. It's about priorities. And it's about leadership that doesn't line up with what people were promised. And that's where the frustration is coming from, because during the campaign, there were clear promises made about improving the city, about making things safer, about restoring some kind of order. And from my perspective, what we are seeing now doesn't match that at all. And the numbers are starting to reflect that. People are feeling it in their daily lives, not just reading about it, but actually dealing with it. Whether it's crime concerns, cost of living, or just the overall feeling that things aren't being handled the way they should be. And now we cross into something that feels even bigger than that, because we're talking about blocking New Yorkers from celebrating America's 250th birthday in Times Square on July 4th. And you got to stop and really think about that for a second. This is not some random event. This is a milestone for the entire country, a celebration of the founding of the United States. Something that should be unifying, something that should bring people together, especially in a place like Times Square, which is supposed to represent America to the world. And yet, what this looks like right now is that kind of celebration gets shut down, while at the same time, you can look at footage coming out of that exact same area and see all kinds of demonstrations, political messaging, protests, and chaos that seem to have no problem getting the green light. And this is where it doesn't add up, because regular people see that contrast and they start asking simple questions, not political questions, just common sense questions like, why is it okay for one thing but not the other? Why can certain groups take over public spaces with flags, chants, and demonstrations, but everyday Americans can't gather to celebrate their own country? not have a monumental, memorable moment recorded at the Big Apple. Individuals that may actually fly down there and enjoy a monumental moment with their family members, their loved ones. And that's the frustration. That's where the frustration starts to build because it feels like the rules aren't being applied evenly. See, there's a difference between actually enjoying something and having a monumental moment through a screen and actually being there physically. And when that happens, people lose trust. And you're seeing that play out right now with New Yorkers pushing back, speaking out, demanding accountability, and in some cases, calling for leadership changes. Because from their perspective, this isn't just a small mistake, it's a sign of a bigger problem, especially when you consider how short the time in office has been. We're talking about roughly 100 days or so, and already people are looking around saying, this is not the direction they signed up for. If you zoom out a little bit, this situation in Times Square becomes a symbol of something larger because Times Square isn't just any location, it's one of the most visible places in the country. It's where tourists go, where families visit, where businesses depend on steady traffic, and where major cultural moments are supposed to happen. So when you block something like a 4th of July celebration there, it doesn't just affect a single event. It affects vendors who are counting on that business. It affects families who plan trips around it. It affects workers in that area who rely on these crowds. And it sends a message about what is and isn't prioritized. And again, from my perspective, that's where people start to feel like things are flipped. Like what should be simple is being made complicated, and what should be supported is being restricted. And it reminds me of a verse. And I came across this verse from a video. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Because whether you're religious or not, the point there is easy to understand, right? When a society starts flipping its values, confusion follows. And that confusion is exactly what people are reacting to right now. That's the whole point, whether you're religious or not. You can easily understand it. Because in real life, this doesn't play out as some abstract political debate. It shows up in very practical ways. It shows up when a family out of state plans a trip to New York to experience a major national celebration, like I mentioned, and finds out it's not happening the way they expected. It shows up when a small business owner near Times Square is trying to figure out why certain events are allowed while others aren't. It shows up when residents are already dealing with high rent, high taxes, and concerns about safety, and then see decisions like this and feel like their priorities are being ignored. And think about it. If you're living in a city where you're already worried about things like crime or public disorder, and then you see leadership focusing on restricting something like a patriotic celebration instead of addressing those day to day concerns, it's going to feel backwards. It's going to feel like the focus is in the wrong place. And that's why people are speaking up, not because they're looking for conflict, but because they want consistency. They want to know that the same standards apply across the board. And this is where the broader pattern comes into play because this isn't happening in isolation. It ties into a larger conversation about how policies are being implemented in major cities, especially ones that have been dealing with ongoing issues around public safety, housing costs, and quality of life. And from my perspective, when you look at cities like New York or Chicago, you start to see similar concerns pop up where residents feel like enforcement is inconsistent, where certain behaviors are tolerated while others are restricted, and where the gap between what was promised and what's actually happening continues to grow. And again, this isn't about attacking individuals. It's about looking at outcomes. It's about asking whether the policies in place are actually improving lives or making them more confusing. When you bring the Constitution into this conversation, it adds another layer because at a basic level, we're talking about rights that are supposed to be protected, like the ability to assemble, to express ideas, and yes, to celebrate national identity. And from my perspective, when those rights start to feel selectively applied, people are going to question that. They're going to push back because the expectation is that these freedoms apply to everyone, not just certain groups or certain viewpoints. And to be fair, there are always arguments on the other side. People would say there are safety concerns, logistical challenges, crowd control issues, and those are real considerations, especially in a place as busy as Times Square. But this is where people look at the situation and say, okay, if those concerns are valid, then why do they apply differently depending on the type of event? I mean, don't we go to New Year's and have a good time at New Year's at a monumental moment like that as well? Is New Year's When it comes time for a new year in 2027, are we going to see restrictions as well? Why is it that large scale demonstrations can happen sometimes with significant disruption, but a structured planned celebration faces restrictions and at the gap? That's the gap, right? That's the gap. That isn't being clearly explained. And when that gap isn't addressed, it leads to more skepticism, more frustration, and more division. And if you take it a step further, this becomes part of a bigger cultural conversation about how we view the country itself. Because for a lot of people, celebrating something like the 4th of July isn't about politics. It's about tradition. It's about history. It's about acknowledging where the country came from and how far we came, right? And the principles it was built on, including ideas like individual rights. And I get it. There's very controversial things. No country is perfect. The United States isn't perfect. But at the end of the day, you have to at least embrace and enjoy and acknowledge and appreciate how far we have come and still going, right? Like individual rights, limited government, and personal freedom. And from a conservative perspective, those principles are worth protecting, not downplaying. And when policies or decisions appear to move away from that, people are going to notice, they're going to question it, and they're going to speak out. And that's what you're seeing right now, not just in New York, but in conversations happening across the country where people are asking what direction we are heading in and where the current approach is actually helping or hurting. But at the end of the day, it comes back to a simple question. What kind of country are we trying to be? Are we a place where national milestones are recognized and celebrated openly? Or are we moving towards something where those moments become restricted or pushed aside? And from my perspective, that's not a small question because it affects how people feel about their community, their rights, and their future. And regardless of where you stand politically, there's value in having that conversation honestly. Looking at real world outcomes and asking whether the current path is making things better or more complicated. Because people aren't just reacting to headlines, they're reacting to what they see and experience every day. And if those experiences don't line up with what they were told to expect, they're going to demand answers. And that's exactly what's starting to happen. So I want to hear from you, right? Does this make sense based on what you're seeing? Or do you think there's more to it, right? Drop your comments below because this is a conversation that's not going away anytime soon. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and then I want you guys to check this out.
As we all know, the United States turns 250 years old. In just a couple years, we will catch up to the age of Nancy Pelosi. Not quite yet, but eventually we will catch up as a nation. When a country turns 250 years old, clearly, obviously, there is a need for celebration, especially celebration of a country as great as the United States of America. And so in all corners of the country, various events are being planned to celebrate a historic and monumental feat of existing as the greatest country in the world for 250 years. Last year, the NYC the New York City New Year's Eve organizers who organized the ball dropping in Times Square and everybody kisses and the mainstream media shows a biracial gay couple making out for way too long immediately after the ball drops to show diversity or whatever. Those organizers announced last year that on July 3rd of this year, for the first time since the tradition began in 1907, a second ball drop will be held. This, clearly, to mark the 250-year anniversary of America's founding. However, there is a slight hiccup, and that hiccup is a Ugandan Muslim socialist who happens to be the mayor of New York City. America 250 and the One Times Square, which is the organizers who do the ball drop, issued a joint statement the other day that said this: the July 3rd ball drop is confirmed and will take place at One Times Square. Yes, celebrating the greatest country in the world and our ability to withstand all of the setbacks that have beset this great, great nation and continue forward in the greatest experiment of mankind. Alongside a live broadcast and celebration, while there will be no public event at the Times Square Plaza. What? We're going to have a big ball drop in the middle of Times Square just like we do for New Year's Eve and no one's going to be there? The statement went on to say, we're working through the standard coordination with city partners and look forward to sharing additional details soon. What additional details need to be shared? if cool, the ball will drop, and I guess there will be a camera on the ball dropping, but if nobody's there to celebrate it, what's the point? They basically said there's not going to be no attendees, to which I was like, well, I'm of two minds of this. One, having gone and seen the Christmas tree lighting at Rockefeller Center, I don't know why anybody would stand out there in the crowd having to go to the bathroom for that amount of time. It doesn't make sense to me what anyone would do that. But also, what is the point? If nobody's going to be there, why are you even having this event? And can you even call it an event if nobody is there to participate in said event? It's like decorating your entire house for a big party.
Times Square, a ball drop is planned to celebrate America's 250th birthday. But thanks to Mayor Mamdani's emergency order denying permits during the World Cup, the public isn't invited to attend.
Say what?
So our famous communist won't allow people to come up and see and celebrate 250th years for the U.S. He needs to go.
Is this America? Is this really New York? Where we at?
I think that's really sad.
Yeah, I think that's very silly.
Oh, Janish, you'd imagine it should be allowed.
It's something we're celebrating, right? So it's supposed to be open for people to come in.
New Year's Eve, everybody's out here allowed to be here, so why can't it be then?
We have to, live our lives. Can't be afraid.
I should probably articulate that I'm a Canadian. That would never happen in Canada. The public should be allowed to go.
I think that should be something that everybody should be included on. I mean, that's a big milestone in our nation's history. Kind of frustrating because I was kind of excited to come down here for that. But, I'm not buying a ticket.
It's ridiculous. Absurd. Get out of here.
Get out of here. I agree.
Yeah, I want to say this real quick, and I'm going to keep it real and keep it grounded because this is one of those topics where people get emotional fast. But let's slow it down and actually think it through. Because from my perspective, this isn't about where someone comes from as a person. It's about how leadership decisions line up with the country they're supposed to serve, and whether those decisions reflect the values and the Constitution of the United States. And here's what this actually looks like in real life. When people start feeling like leaders are out of touch with everyday Americans, whether that's in New York City or somewhere else, frustration builds. And you're seeing that literally right now. Because people want leadership that understands the culture, the history, and the principles this country was built on. The good and the bad, all of it, not just pieces of it. And when that connection feels weak or inconsistent, people start asking questions, and that's where this conversation is coming from. Not out of nowhere, but out of what people are seeing and experiencing. And think about it like this. If you're a lifelong resident somewhere, you've seen how policies play out over time. You've seen what works and what doesn't. You've seen how decisions affect neighborhoods, schools, safety, and cost of living. So naturally, you're going to expect the people making decisions to have a deep understanding of that same reality. When it feels like they don't, or like the priorities are different, that's where the disconnect happens. And that's what people are reacting to, especially when policies come across as going against what they believe are core American principles like individual rights, constitutional protections, and national identity. And from my perspective, the bigger issue here is alignment. It's about whether the people in leadership positions are fully committed to upholding the Constitution and the values that come with it. Because at the end of the day, that's the standard, not personal background, not identity, but actions and outcomes. And this is where it doesn't add up for a lot of people because they look at certain policies and feel like they move away from those principles instead of reinforcing them. And that's when you start hearing calls for change, not just in one city, but across different levels of government, because people want to feel like their leaders are representing them, their values, and their way of life. And again, to be fair, there are people who will say that America is built on immigration and that people from different backgrounds can contribute and lead effectively. And that's a real part of this country's history. But the counterpoint from my perspective is that leadership still has to be rooted in a strong understanding and respect for the Constitution and the country itself. Because without that, you end up with policies that feel disconnected from the people they impact. And that's what we're seeing play out in places where residents feel like decisions are being made that don't reflect their priorities. And when that happens, people start saying something has got to give, because they're not seeing the results they were promised. They're not seeing improvements in their day-to-day lives. And instead, they're seeing more confusion, more frustration, and more questions about the direction things are heading. And that's why this conversation isn't going away anytime soon. Because at the core of it, people are asking a simple question. Are our leaders truly representing the country and the Constitution they were supposed to? Or are we moving in a direction that feels out of step with both? And it also makes people question, and I heard individuals have said this, just out there, in the public. Individuals in the public are basically saying, coming across videos like this, that, hey, this is why we need individuals, foreign people, not to take office in Americans' government, any forms of government, when it comes to being public officials. Let me know what you guys think about that, because I've been seeing that go across and around the internet as well, circulating. Let me know what you guys' thoughts about that. Do you believe that will keep things aligned with what I said, like representing the Constitution and American values in the country to be upheld and not be overthrown because foreign individuals, people feel like, are basically discrediting and stepping away from American values and bringing their own values from the country they originally came from that's not America? So let me know what you guys think. But now I want you guys to check out this last video. I found it to be very, very distasting, I should say. Very divisive.
They're going to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the country July 4th. But that's not our celebration. We were slaves then. And they celebrate signing the Declaration of Independence 1776. We were not even emancipated until 1863. So I don't know what everybody getting ready for a celebration. That it seems crazy for me to have on the birthday hat at your birthday party. That ain't my party. In fact, I'm thinking Saturday when I do my address to the convention, they're calling for something on July 4th, like Frederick Douglass did. Why should we be celebrating that? We may need to do our own rally in Philly or somewhere that day, because that's not our background.
I can't stand it. I really can't, because this is where the conversation just goes completely off the rails. And let's be real for a second. When we start talking about America, we got to tell the full story, not just the part that fits the narrative, not just the parts that get attention online, but the whole story, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Because before the hashtags, before the politics, there were real people who put their lives on the line for this country, and that includes Black Americans. And that's a fact, right? If people want to acknowledge it or not. And here's what this actually looks like when you slow it down. You got Crispus Attucks, Crispus Attucks, a Black man, the first, I always botch his name, the Black man, the first person to die in Boston Massacre. Look it up. The first martyr of the American Revolution. And you're telling me we're supposed to ignore that? You got Peter Salem, a former slave, standing on the front lines at Bunker Hill, fighting for a freedom he didn't even fully have yet. And you got Salem Poor, recognized for his bravery in a battle to the point where other soldiers had to stop and acknowledge it. And they weren't alone. There were thousands of Black men who fought for this country in its earliest days. Think about that for a second. They didn't wait for things to be perfect. They didn't sit back and say this country hasn't done right by me. So I'm not going to fight for it. They stepped up anyway, right? And that matters, right? That legacy matters. And from my perspective, it deserves to be recognized. So it's mind-blowing to me, right? Because, like I said, they didn't wait for things to be perfect. They didn't sit back and say, this country hasn't done right by me. This country hasn't done nothing for me, so I'm not going to fight. They stepped up and fought anyway. I got to say that again, because that's an important part, which discredits his whole point. And not only does it deserves to be recognized, but not dismissed or rewritten. And that's why this conversation gets frustrating, because when people act like that history doesn't exist or try to downplay it, it feels like they're erasing part of what makes this country what it is. And it does remind me, and I came across watching this video, John chapter 15, verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends, because that's exactly what those men did. And the question becomes simple. Do we honor that or do we ignore it? Because you can't say you care about justice or truth while leaving out major parts of the story. And this is where it doesn't add up, because on one hand, there's this push to focus only on negative parts of American history. And yes, slavery was real. It was wrong. It's a stain on this country. Nobody's denying that. But that's not the entire story. There were also free Black men. There were contributions across every major conflict this country has been involved in. from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to modern times. And that's part of American story too, the American story. And when you ignore that, you create a distorted picture that doesn't help anyone understand where we are today. And from my perspective, that kind of framing doesn't bring people together. It creates more division, divisiveness, because it tells people to focus only on what went wrong without recognizing what was built and who helped build it. And this is why I push back on voices that seem to constantly downplay that legacy, because it sends the message that those contributions don't matter. And that's just not true. And when you look at the bigger picture, it comes back to pride and perspective, because no country is perfect. No group of people is perfect. And that's just reality. And when you compare the United States to the rest of the world, when you look at opportunity, freedom, and quality of life, there's a reason people still come here. There's a reason people are willing to risk everything to be here. And that's not by accident. If you're born here, if you're living here, that's something to recognize, not to be taken for granted. And again, that doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means understanding the full picture, full context, understanding the sacrifices that were made, and appreciating the system that allows people to speak, to build, to succeed, and to push for change. And from my perspective, that's worth celebrating, especially when you're talking about something like the 250 years of this country existing, because that represents generations of people from all backgrounds who contributed to where we are today. And when that gets brushed aside or minimized, it rubs people the wrong way for a reason, because it feels disconnected from reality. And at the end of the day, the real question is simple. Are we going to acknowledge the full history of this country and take pride in it while continuing to improve? Or are we going to keep focusing on narratives that divide people and ignore everything else? Because that choice shapes how people see their country, their opportunities, and their future. And that's why this matters more than people think. So with that being said, and also, just to be quite frank, if you was to go to China or Mexico and say something so anti against the country, let's say hypothetically Reverend, because this was Reverend Al Sharpton speaking with the brown suit in the clip right here. Let's say he was from Mexico and he talked horrible about Mexico or China. They would put him in a concentration camp, and they basically would not even allow him to say this freely, which is the beauty of this country. But I also know that race grifting and also divisiveness is $1 million business, and all money isn't good money, and it's very negative, and it's very, how can I put it? It's just hatred disguised and led by divisiveness. And if we don't understand that we all made this country together and contributed with the opportunities and the choices the choices that we have, and the choices that we basically are granted every single day with the privileges and the beauty of this country and so many opportunities, you're like basically fueling hate for individuals to go against each other because of their backgrounds, instead of embracing the background and also the beauty of this country, which the beauty of this country comes with so many cultures, like for example, foods. Be able to enjoy different types of food, Mexican food, Spanish food, soul food, doesn't matter. So what I'm saying is you're dividing people based on race, which he's basically advocating, and separating people instead of coming with unity and love to actually embrace each other, in which we all contributed to America, within it being his 250th birthday, through all is good and bad. But we gotta move forward and stop dawning on the imperfections of this country, because obviously we came this far today to where it's way more better, obviously. And to speak to him, black people are freer than ever. White people are freer than ever. So I don't get, why aren't we focused on just continue to build in unity to help the schools continue to improve for the generations after us, public safety, things that are important that we all contribute to this country in unity and love. And I just hate the race grifting. I hate the divisiveness, because all it does is spread hate. But I don't really try to speak to it, because I remember a quote from Morgan Freeman that the way to kill divisiveness and the way to kill hatred fueled by racism and division is basically not to entertain it, right? To not speak to it, because as the more you speak to it, the more energy and the more power you give it. So I was just breaking this down to basically discredit his point that he's being very disingenuous, but also to advocate for unity and not just division, in which that's wrapped around in this clip. But at the end of the day, I want to know what you guys think about this. How do you see it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Turn your post notifications on so you don't miss anything. I'll catch you in the next one, family. Peace.